Hello, art historians. Today we are back with Early Europe video number 4, where we are going to discuss Islamic art. And so we're going to talk a little bit about Islamic art here, but we're going to actually talk more about Islam as a religion when we do West and Central. So we're going to talk a little bit about Islam, but we're going to do most of our talking about Islam when we do West and Central Asia. It's just easier that way. You're going to get a lot of Christian art here, and so I'm going to talk a little bit more about Islam when we actually do some of the most holy Islamic sites. I will talk a little bit about Islam's colors, though, so that you understand a little bit of what you're looking at. In Islam, green is the most sacred color. That is because Muhammad, who they often refer to as the prophet, wore a green cloak and turban. The flag of Muhammad is called the Black Standard, and it's just an all black flag. Brown is the color of peace and purity. White is the color for Friday prayers. And black, being the flag of Muhammad, is also the color of like modesty and piety. And then blue is the color of like protection. And so as you think about that, think about some of these colors, think about some of the things that you hear, and then look for some of these colors when you see some of these artworks we're going to do. So we're going to start with this, the Great Mosque. It's also called the Great Mosque of Cordoba, and it is in Cordoba, Spain. It is the Umayyad dynasty. 784 was when it was begun, and 785 is when it was begun, and the majority, a good portion of the construction, was finished by 987. And why I say that is it's a huge complex, and the majority of it was finished in 987. It's giant. It's a giant complex, and we'll look at that in a second. So you're looking at stone masonry, and you're looking at Spain, and you have to remember that when we think about Spain, we have to think about the idea that Spain is very close to Africa, and that where the tip of Spain meets the tip of Africa, there were a lot of Muslims who came in from Africa into Spain, and it's called Moorish Spain because in the seventh and eighth century, it was a hugely Muslim population. Okay. And Spain was ruled by Muslims for hundreds and hundreds of years. And when the Moors came in and sort of began to run this area of Spain, they set their capital here at Cordoba. This is the largest mosque in all of Europe. It is a hypostyle hall. So when we get in there, you'll see a bunch of columns and things like that. I'm going to switch for a second to this is one of your views, and I'm going to come back to this view. This is another one of your views, and I come to this one because this, I think, is a better version of understanding what you're looking at. Okay, theme, buildings that change use. This is a minaret. Okay, M-I-N-A-R-E-T. We talked about this when we did Hagia Sophia, that minarets are added to mosques because a minaret is where the person would go up to call people to worship. They would go up the minarets. They would call out, sing pieces of the Quran to call people to come to worship. So that is what you see there. This is the part that doesn't look like it fits. And you're right. It's because it doesn't. This is one of the most controversial things in art. So what you're looking at is this area was run by the Muslims. And then in the 1500s, when the Catholics ran the Muslims out of Spain and back into Africa, the Catholics took over this mosque, and in the center of it, cut out the center of the mosque and built a Catholic church in the center. So that doesn't look like it fits, because it doesn't. This building began its construction, you really need to think about this. When this building started to be constructed, Islam, the religion of Islam, was only 100 years old. So this is one of the older pieces of construction from Islam. It was super, super important. And then the Catholics came in the 16th century under Charles V, and cut down all the columns and cut out a big section of the center and built a Catholic church in the center of it. So that's what you're looking at. So that's why your theme is buildings that change use. And that is why this side view is weird, because this is not what it would have looked like unless the Catholics had done that. None of this that you see here would have been there, because when you looked at the wall that goes around the mosque, you would have just seen roofs, right? Because this is the walled area where the mosques are. Where the mosque is. And there's almost always sort of like a courtyard open area, and there's almost always a water feature here. And we'll talk more about that when we get into talking about Islam. But this was the center of Western Islam for a really long time. So Islam has its center in Saudi Arabia. But this was like the Western capital of Islam. It is considered to be a wonder of the medieval world. It is considered to be one of the first mosques ever built. Because like I said, Islam was only 100 years old when they began construction. Early Islam was a religion that didn't really have a hierarchy. Like everybody inside of Islam was equal, sort of at the beginning, and now there is sort of a hierarchy, and some imams are considered more powerful than others. But at the beginning, Islam was really a religion without a hierarchy, and because of that, everybody inside is equal. So because of that, the construction is sort of vast, to fill all of the places. And the concept is, unlike a Catholic church that requires a view of the altar from wherever you are in the church, that does not exist in Islam. And we're going to talk about what the important pieces are in a mosque in a minute. But what happens here is the attempt at construction of this piece is that early mosques were meant to feel vast. They were meant to feel infinite. You were meant to feel like you were very small in this large place. And they were meant to feel like you had stepped into almost a paradise. So when you come in through this courtyard with all of the trees, it feels very different from everything else that's around it. And there's always, as I said, there's almost always water. And that is because there's the belief that you have to wash before you can go in. So there's always a water feature. And we'll talk more about that later. So let's go inside. How about that? It's stunning. Okay, so here's your hypostyle hall. These are called horseshoe columns because they're not quite an arch, because they're tighter than an arch. They make more of a U, like that comes in at the bottom. And you're going to see that there are all of these beautiful horseshoe arches on top of columns, but they're not Roman columns. They're something different. And you get these beautiful, look at this sculptural element here. So this is very Islamic. And you're going to notice here's geometrics, this is all geometric. And that is because, and we talked about it, there's lots of reliefs of flowers and grass and lots of geometrics. But in Islam, there can be no graven images of animals or people. Okay. So what you see here is just a lot of beautiful architecture. And look at how vast it is. Here's a mosque lamp, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It just keeps going and going and going and going because there is no central focus here. But even though there's no central focus, it feels open. The height of the columns, I had that written down. The height of the columns at 13 feet before you even start putting anything on it allows for a very open feeling. So there's almost always not almost always, there is always a focal point though in a mosque, because Islam requires that there is a mihrab. So this is some more of the, I forgot that there was this. These are some more of those geometrics and mosaics. Beautiful, right? They're so stunning. There's that horseshoe arch. There's that scalloped arch. Here's that horseshoe arch again. Okay, so these designs on the outside echo the designs on the inside. And again, no images of humans or animals. We have some flowers, some geometrics, more flowers, but no humans or animals. All right, AP, you need to know this. And this is really unfortunate. This is what the floor plan would have looked like had they not put the Catholic Church inside of it. So you can just see row after row after row after row after row after row after row of columns. Hundreds, 850 columns. It's often referred to as the forest of pillars. So when you're thinking about how a mosque is built, there is mihrab. No, I'm going to skip that. I'm going to come back to it. Oh, do I not have a picture of the mihrab in here? Really? So inside the mosque, you're required to have a place where you can face Mecca to pray. And there's usually a dome over top of it. So here's your beautiful dome that would have sat over top of the mihrab. And the mihrab's job is to identify which way is Mecca. And so what you'll see is this is not orientated on a north, south, east, west axis. It's at an angle. And that is because this is where the mihrab is, because that is Mecca. Mecca is that way. Most buildings kind of sit on that like east, west, north, south kind of thing, but not this one, because this one, mosques need to be orientated so that, I'm sorry, I keep saying orientated. That is the British way to say it. I don't know what is wrong with me today. I've said it now like two or three times. I'm actually in the middle of reading a book that is set in England. That might be why. So here, this is how you know Mecca is that way. And so as long as you know which way is Mecca, and because Mecca is that way, as long as you're in these columned areas and you're facing forward, you're facing Mecca. You don't have to see the mihrab. You don't have to see where the imam is. You don't have to see any of the other things that we're used to seeing in a Christian church. You just have to be able to know which way Mecca is. Okay. And so this is our mosque at Cordova. This is not one of your images, but this is, you can see right here, here's horseshoe arch, or horseshoe arch, horseshoe arch, horseshoe arch, and then they cut out the center and built this Catholic church inside of it. It's very sad. All right, next. The Pyxis of Al-Mukhira. Mrs. Foreman, what the heck is a pyxis? A pyxis is a cylindrical box, often used for cosmetics or aromatics. So You could put your coal in here if you were going to do coal on your eyes. You could put your lavender in here if you wanted your room to smell nice. This one is actually, it is carved and says that this one is actually meant to be used for aromatics. It's meant to be like a diffuser. Okay? Make your room smell pretty. And by looking at it, the very first thing you know by looking at it, I see some people, I see some animals, and the very first thing I know just by looking at this is I know that this was not used for a religious purpose. There's no way it could have been used for a religious purpose because humans and animals are not allowed to be on anything that is used for a religious purpose in Islam. Okay, so that's the very first thing we know just looking at it. But that doesn't mean that that Muslims didn't make amazing art that did have people and things like that on it. So you're looking at a carved ivory box. It would have been made from an elephant tusk, and the lid does come off. And it was given as a gift to al-Mukhira for his 18th birthday. And it is one of the best surviving examples of royal ivory carving in all of Islamic Spain. Excuse me. So, al-Mukhira was a member of the royal family. And this was inscripted to him, may God's blessings favors joy. God's blessing favors joy to al-Mukhira. May God have mercy on him. That's what it says. So what we have to pay attention to is because we see the people and because we see the animals, and we know that it is not religious, but we also know that humans and animals are a huge part of their artistic iconography, just not in religion. And they're very good at carving those. This is the same dynasty, the Umayyad dynasty, the same dynasty that created the mosque at Cordoba and that created the next building, that started the next building at the Alhambra. So we'll get there in a second. So what we see here is a lute player. Like a lute is like a small guitar. And we see a lute player surrounded by two men. This guy has the scepter of the Umayyads. And this guy has a fan of the two tribes. I'm sorry, scepter of the Umayyad, fan of the two tribes. Okay. It's beautifully decorated. We're going to zoom in to the next one. Here's our fan of the two tribes of the Umayyad. Here's our lute player. Here's our scepter of power, some aromatics here. And then we have these beautiful, intricate carvings. We have some lions eating a gazelle. And this is the inscription to al-Mukhira for his birthday and God's blessings upon him. Okay. We see here hunting, but there's also depicted on this piece falconry and other sports, musicians. So this is just sort of a look into what was popular in the Umayyad dynasty. Let's scroll in one more time. And we see these beautiful animals down here and this man going falconing. He has his bird, his falcon. And so this is beautiful. And it is indicative of the kind of high, just high art that came out of Muslim Spain at the time. And they were famous for their metalwork. And you will get some samples of their metalwork when we do West and Central Asia. That is where you get some of the samples of their metalwork. We're just doing European for right now. So this is the ivory work of Spain. I said this on the last video. I have a little bit of a cold. Please excuse me while I drink my hot tea every once in a while. All right. This is the Alhambra. And so what's amazing about this building is just how big it is and how sprawling it is, and what a huge complex is here, and what it does. Again, we are in Spain, Granada, very close to again where Spain meets Africa. Excuse me. And Alhambra means the red one. And so, if the way that I try to remember this is because a lot of people confuse Cordoba with Alhambra. And Cordoba has those horseshoe arches that kind of look like a C. And Alhambra is made really of sort of this red adobe, which is very pretty. So I'm hoping that will help you sort of little tips to help you tell the difference. So this is your first image. Look at the beautiful mountains in the background. So the Nasrid were part of the Umayyad dynasty, and then they moved to southern Spain. They were the sultans of southern Spain. And what's interesting about this this complex is it sits up on a hill, kind of like the Acropolis, and it overlooks the city. But this building had no real master plan. A lot of times when we're building a complex, we have a basic idea of what we're going to do. We have a basic plan of what we're going to attack. This didn't have that. Also, you should remember that the Cordoba is a mosque and Alhambra is not a mosque. So we should probably say that too. That's probably one of the first things that I should say, actually. So while it didn't have a master plan, it is very complex. It has amazing decorations. It has gardens. It has fountains. It has flowing water in every room. It is often called a pearl set among the emeralds, and that is because it's surrounded by all of these trees. And it's this just bright, shining thing in the middle of all of these trees. So it wasn't a mosque. It did have three purposes. It was a barracks, so they kept their army here. It was the residence for the Sultan and his family. And it was also the housing for court officials. If court officials needed to come and see the Sultan, they would stay here. There actually were three royal palaces. This one actually was let to ruin. It was abandoned when the Christians came in. It was just abandoned, and it was rediscovered in the 1800s and began to be restored and by archaeologists. And the Nasrids were the last really Muslim rules in Spain. It looks like a Christian stronghold, a medieval Christian stronghold, because that's sort of what it's based on. They, looked at how the Christians built things to keep people out, and they said, this sounds like a good thing to do, especially if this is where we're going to keep our Sultan and our army. So let's sort of copy the Christians here. So I'm going to skip this and go to the thing first. So this is your next image, which is this is the floor plan. And what you're going to see here is we're going to see this room right here, the Court of the Lions. Okay. And then we're going to see the Hall of the Sisters, which I'll show you in a minute. That's this one right here, Court of the Lions, Hall of the Sisters. All right. So what you need to understand, though, is there are lots of, this is where the ambassadors would be. This is where they would, the oratory where they would meet. Here's it's all very cool. It's a huge complex and just keeps going and going and going and going and going and going and going. All right. So let's come back to, where do I want to go next? Yeah. Let's come back to the Court of the Lions. All right. So here we have, is that the last? Yeah. Court of the Lions is an oblong courtyard. It is 116 feet long. That is really long. 66 feet wide, and surrounded by this gallery, which is a protected portico area that has all of these. So you can walk. That's what it means by a gallery. You can just walk along the edge here and you're covered, which is important in the sun of Grenada. I'm sorry, which is important in the sun, of Grenada. I was right. I question myself sometimes. And so what happens is you can walk out here along the fountain in the water, in the shade, and see the water and listen to the water, because every room in the Alhambra has running water. The fountain was run by a hydraulic water system. And the fountain would just pour this water out into the fountain. And then you can see these channels. There would be bubbling, these little bubbling areas that would come across and then go that way and go that way. So the water actually bubbled out of the fountain and then went down the 4 channels and then continued to move throughout the 4 channels into the other rooms at the side. What's cool about this Islamic design is we still have columns, but instead of what the Romans and the Greeks would have done, which is right here, they would have put a big fat giant column. Islamic design puts very thin, fine columns instead. Everything just feels lighter and airier. Look at the light coming through this carved wood. That's just wood that has an intricate pattern carved in it. I mean, you can see it there. It's stunning. So a little bit of the light comes in. It casts really interesting shadows. The patio goes all the way around the courtyard, so you can walk all the way around. And water is, an important piece of Muslim architecture, especially in mosques, but also in homes. And what this house tries to do is it tries to sort of blur the border between inside and outside. There are lots of courtyards, there are lots of patios, there are lots of walkways, lots of covered areas, lots of shade, lots of windows up high and off to the side so that you get diffused light instead of light that comes pouring in and is sort of painful. When you look at this, you realize that this is a gathering place, but there are plants and there's water, and it is just beautiful design. I get overwhelmed sometimes when I look at the Alhambra. It's just so pretty. So this is called the Hall of the Sisters, and you can see here comes the water from the other side, from where the Court of the Lions is, and it comes bubbling into the center. And it is so hard to take a picture of these beautiful, 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 they're like stalactites at the top. This is if you look straight up at the ceiling. And then this is if you look from the side. It looks like little pieces of lace that are made of wood that come down. But when you look up into it, it's just absolutely stunning. And you can see again, here's those little pieces of lace that come down and little pieces of lace. And then when you look up and you see all of those little pieces of lace up in the roof, it's wonderful. And they're not actually lace. I said this, they're made of wood. So we're looking at houses with gardens, animals in art, water in art. In the Hall of the Sisters, this is this giant room, and there are a ton of windows at the top. You can see them 1, 2, 3, and this is what I was talking about when I say, look at the windows. Okay, they come in these pairs at the top, but the glass has a texture to it to keep the light from coming in and being too bright. And the windows are up high. But because all of this is painted white, the light reflects off it and you get this beautiful diffused light. This room was used for receptions, for musical performances. And so that is why the roof is so high. It's got this beautiful dome. And people wonder at why this doesn't seem to look as, air quotes, Muslim as other Muslim art pieces, Muslim buildings. And that is because Cordoba is in the middle of, Spain. The Alhambra is more isolated. And that's how it was able to fall into disuse and have to be rediscovered. Because the Alhambra is built in an area that is more isolated, it has less interaction with the Muslim world. And so it has almost its own unique construction. And so if you wonder why it looks so different from some of the other Muslim pieces we've looked at, it's because of its location. It's very isolated. And so it sort of did its own thing. All right. Here's our last piece of Muslim art. So we're looking at Edirne, Turkey. This is still Europe. We have an architect. Sinan is your architect. It's very important. Anytime we can identify who constructed a piece, the happier we are, because we can do some research into what they were doing. I'm hoping that you're noticing how much this looks like Hagia Sophia, because it does. But this is more blue. It does have that big dome, but not so much the huge half domes. It does have sort of quarter domes. These are clearly built to match this. This fits very much in its style. Okay. These stacked domes are very Ottoman, and these little tiny thin minarets are also very Ottoman. Sinan is considered to be the best architect in the Ottoman Empire, if not one of the greatest architects of all time. He is kind of a big deal when it comes to studying architecture. My nephew studied architecture, and it's, he's a big deal. So what is the purpose of this building? Why do we have this building? Especially when we look at the construction of this building, we realize that like the Muslims already have control of Hagia Sophia by this point. So why do we build another one that is so similar to the building we have in Istanbul? Well, children, let me tell you, story time. So Suleiman the Magnificent was in charge of the Ottoman Empire, and his son, Selim II, oh look, the Mosque of Selim II. His son, Selim II, was prince. And Suleiman the Magnificent wanted Selim to learn how to run an empire. And so what he did was he picked Turkey as his place for Selim to figure this out. And so Selim was like, okay, this is my city. I like this city. Let's work on making it like impressive. And let's work on, building up the city and building up, not just a mosque, but a whole big thing. And we're going to make this city important. So this was really Selim getting his feet wet and learning how to organize people and learning how to give orders and directions, and learning how to impress visitors and run an empire. And so he hires Sinan to build what he says he wants to. He wanted this mosque to stand out. He says Istanbul had a lot of mosques and a lot of buildings and a lot of stuff, and I want this mosque complex, and notice I just said mosque complex because it is complex. I want this mosque complex to go down in history. So while the dome at Hagia Sophia is beautiful, this dome is spectacular. It is larger, it is higher, it feels weightless when you go inside. And I'm going to take you inside in a second. But before we do that, I want to look at, do I not have a really, okay. I want to look at this plan. And the reason I want to look at this plan is because I want you to see, and I'm hoping when you look at that and you're like, wait, shops? Yeah. I want you to look at this and I want you to see that when I say that this is a complex, I mean it. You come in through the courtyard. Here's your fountain for washing. Here's your prayer hall. Here are your shops. Here's the schools. There's also a hospital and a library. When Selim instructed Sinan to build this, he wanted it to be a force to be reckoned with. And so it is. It is not just a mosque. Okay, it is a mosque and a hospital and a library and a school and shops. And it should remind you a little bit, I hope you're thinking of it, of the Forum. That's sort of what we're looking at. It's a complex that is meant to do a bunch of things. Okay, so let's go back inside and let's look at that dome. Whew, it is beautiful. I think one of the reasons that this feels so light and it feels so airy is look at all of the windows. Okay. Hagia Sophia does not have all these windows. It just doesn't. Okay. And you're going to notice when I go back here, notice that this is square. Okay, we talked about squinches and we talked about, I'm sorry. We talked about squinches and we talked about pendentives, and this is that square squinches. This is just set down on a square. And you can go back and look at that squinches thing. I have it on your modules, and I have it in the other PowerPoint with the Hagia Sophia. So this is a much more open plan because of the light and the windows. It feels very large because it is. We're looking at it's 103 feet in diameter. It's 139 feet tall. I mean, that's a 12-story building. It's huge. And so when I talked before when we did Cordoba, and I said that the mosque is meant to make you feel like it's infinite, like the space is large, like it doesn't stop. That is what this does in a different way than Cordoba. Okay, Cordoba has the vastness of just rows and rows and rows and rows and rows and rows and rows of columns that it just seems to go on forever. This has the vastness of it seems to go on forever, but instead of out in front of you, it seems to go on forever above you. Again, that idea of the infinite, the idea of the glory of Allah, the idea of the possibility of what Allah can do. Okay. So it is centrally planned, which means that in the center, they often put, this is your floor plan. They didn't give you, I'm sorry, I should have said this before. I gave you the one that was labeled. They don't give you the one that's labeled. And I don't like that. So they actually want you to know this one, but I gave you the one that's labeled. So this is really cool. This is the Muezzin's platform, and his job is to come out and read the prayers and lead the prayers and chant to the congregation. So it's kind of like an altar, except what's cool about this is that this you don't have to see it. You don't have to have a sight line of it. And so what Sinan did was he built this underneath this beautiful dome, but up so that the Muezzin stands up on this platform under the center of the dome. But then there's all this area for people to gather and listen and pray. And he is surrounded by people who are, kneeling to do their prayers. It's unusual to have this sitting right underneath the dome. They typically have a tendency to push it off to one side to leave more open space in the center. But Sinan wanted to sort of battle against Christianity and make this mosque for Allah the most beautiful thing ever. And you can see all the lights hanging and the crystals, and it's just stunning. There are all of these beautiful tiles on the inside and all of this beautiful Quranic writing. You can see all of the beautiful decorations here along the side. Did I give you everything? You can see, look at all this beautiful tiling all around. I mean, it's just stunning. Look at all of that. Just look at all of it. So we're dealing with much like the Greeks, we're dealing with geometry and the perfection of geometry. Squares and octagons and circles, arcs, and we see constantly archaeologists returning to the perfection of geometry. And it is beautiful. So I have it here for you again. Dome, squinch. And the squinch sets on the pier. Square, squinch, Salim. Okay, so you can see it's a square back there, and that sits down on top. Let's look at it one more time. Okay, pendentives are pointy, squinches are square. Okay, and that's how we tell the difference. And I told you this before. Hagia Sophia with a P and the pointy pendentive. Salim with a square squinch. Now, when we look at this, what I love about this particular piece of drawing is it really shows you how it works. Okay. Here's the half dome that sits over top of the Marab, the place that points to Mecca. Here are these cute little domes that support the weight of the dome. So the weight comes down this dome into the half domes and down these buttresses. They're not flying buttresses yet. We'll get there. But dome to half dome or dome to buttress, down to more domes, down to the ground. Okay. And what you see here is here's your market. Here's the college for the study of Quran. Here's the college for the study of the life of Muhammad. Okay. Here's your school. And back behind is your hospital. So this is a huge complex, and it is it's beautiful in its here's your courtyard. I forgot to say, here's your outer courtyard coming through here, courtyard. And it's beautiful in its symmetry, and it's beautiful in its desire to serve many purposes, but all of the purposes are for Allah, making the ill well, studying the life of Muhammad, studying the stories of the Quran, becoming educated. Everything here is for the glory of Allah. And it is, it's simple, it's simple in its, when you look at it, it looks just simply symmetrical, but it is stunning and complex and beautiful. And it's one of the most beautiful examples of architecture in the world. So there you go. That is Islam. I will see you next time for Romanesque art. Bye, guys.